Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to continue our journey to Endgame with part 10 and take a look at another movie which was a really big gamble for Marvel, which was the first Guardians of the Galaxy, which came out in 2014. Now this movie, it has a good cast. You Chris Pratt was coming in off of Parks and Rec at the time. You had Zoe Saldana, who was a veteran actress. Dave Bautista, who this was really his first kind of breakout role after he's kind of been in and out of wrestling. Bradley Cooper provides the voice for Rocket Raccoon, and Vin Diesel provides the voice for Groot, as well as Michael Rooker coming in as Yondu. Um, and then also you have James Gunn directing this, which this was his first really, really big film that I think he ever directed. I know he did some stuff like Slither and some other things, but this is like his first A level film that he'd been involved in. This really helped his career at the time. Um, so, Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, it's a far cry from the comic version, but again, I try to judge these more or less by the film itself, and I really enjoy this film. This is one of my favorite MCU films, and it's one of those films you can kind of watch by itself and almost not even need. Well, I shouldn't say need, but it wouldn't matter if it was tied in or not because it's so far removed from the actual MCU. And the let's dive into the film. Now you are introducing a lot of new characters in this movie. It's not and it's different than a typical superhero movie where you just introduce the main character who's the superhero and then you have a few supporting characters and the antagonist. You're introducing five main characters who all have some kind of superpowered ability. It's a team movie essentially. Um, but you're introducing your big character, which is Peter Quill, who's played by Star Lord, who's played by Chris Pratt. And this opening scene kind of does a lot to, again, I've reiterated this on some other films in the MCU. That first scene has to give you a lot about the character, and it does give us a lot about the character, while still leaving some stuff to mystery. Where it shows the first scene again, excuse me, like many Marvel films, goes back to a flashback scene before it jumps up to present day, where Peter Quill is a younger man or a boy, and his mother is dying of cancer, and he basically has to say goodbye, and he runs out, and at the same time he has his little Walkman that has he's playing music, so he runs out and winds up getting picked up by a spaceship, which is piloted by Yondu and his band of mercenaries known as the Ravagers. Now, fast forward, and Chris Pratt is now on this random planet. He's in this place, but the first scene there sets up Chris Pratt. This scene almost sets up the movie, at least tonally. And again, a good first scene does that as well, where Chris Pratt does this hilarious scene where he's listening to music throughout this temple as the credits are rolling by at the same time, and he's listening to "Come and Get Your Love" by Redbone, and there's a lot of really funny scenes where he's karaokeing to the song, and he has at one point he grabs this little rat-like creature and uses it as a microphone. It's very, very funny, and it works for this film because this film is essentially a science fiction action comedy, and I know that's a mouthful, but that's essentially what it is, um, or a sci-fi comedy if you really want to boil it down. But Chris Pratt is going through this whole thing, and he's basically going through this whole thing to get this little silver ball, and we don't know what's in the ball at this point. And as he gets the ball, literally, he is converged on by Kree, and this was our first theatrical introduction to the Kree. Obviously, chronologically we have Captain Marvel that comes before this, but this was our first on-screen introduction, and we also get our introduction to I can't remember the character's name, but he is also in Captain Marvel as a Kree soldier under Ronan, but now he is under Ronan the Accuser. Um, so basically, Chris Pratt through a series of uh, through a series of just antics and clever little tricks manages to get away from them, and he manages to get to the planet of the Nova Corps in order to try and sell his little trinket. Now, at the same time, we find out that Thanos is looking for this little ball thing as well, and this is before we're kind of aware of his interest in Infinity Stones and stuff like that. So this was all kind of new at the time. This was Marvel's first real full foray into the cosmic, what they would refer to as the Marvel cosmic realm or Marvel like space realm. And Guardians of the Galaxy are basically at the forefront of that. And during these scenes with Thanos, we're introduced to Gamora, played by Zoe Saldana, and her sister Nebula. And basically, those two, uh, they have this rivalry. They're Thanos' daughters, obviously, they're adoptive daughters, but they're Thanos' daughters. They're also both super assassins. So the point comes up that basically Gamora says, I can go get it for you. I'm going to go get it for you. And to essentially make her sister jealous. And she winds up going to the Nova Prime planet in order to take the crystal from Peter Quill. Now, Peter Quill can't sell the crystal because apparently he lets slip that Ronan the Accuser wants it. And so his buyer then gets cold feet and says if Ronan the Accuser will murder him because Ronan the Accuser is a sociopath. It's also worthy to note in this that apparently the Nova Corps and the Kree Empire have been at an off and on war for an undetermined amount of time, but there has now been a ceasefire. However, Ronan doesn't care, and he's taken his fleet and kind of become a rogue entity, and has chosen to kill and maim and destroy no matter what, which is interesting. When you consider that the Kree Empire really doesn't, they almost work as like a hive mind, so it's kind of weird to see that. But again, that's probably just a continuity thing that Captain Marvel screwed up, like a lot of other things. Um, so going back now, we also the scenes on the Nova Prime planet are really what, or the Nova Corps planet is really what we. This is where all of our players kind of meet, except for Drax. You don't meet him until a little bit later. But Rocket and Groot are both also on this planet, and they're looking for bounties. Essentially, they're both bounty hunters, and they find out that Peter Quill has a rather high bounty because of his former association with the Ravagers, who were a mercenary slash pirate group. So those two then try to get Peter Quill, while at the same time Gamora tries to get the crystal, and together they are all arrested. Now these scenes themselves kind of set up a lot about the characters, where Groot and Rocket have this very close kind of friendship, even though Rocket tries to be the alpha of the two of them, and it's a good dynamic. And look, I don't really know how uh, Vin Diesel does this, and it's very interesting. But even though Groot literally says "I am Groot" over and over again, he says it in a way where you kind of understand what he's trying to say. Um, and that again, that's just good voice acting, and that's good voice directing um, by James Gunn. So you move forward. They all get arrested. They all get sent off to this prison where they're basically going to be held for the remainder of their lives. You have a few prison scenes, which are kind of interesting. There is a hilarious scene where Peter Quill is essentially almost made a prison bitch by this random guy, and Groot then proceeds to go up and uh, beat the living hell out of this guy. when I say beat the living hell out of him, I mean he shoves roots up this guy's nose and presumably rips something off because the guy is bleeding to all hell. They don't show it on screen, but Rocket basically says that Quill is theirs, and they're not going to they're not going to let anything happen to him. Which again kind of sets up this team dynamic where everybody's kind of uh, in it for what to escape, and that it's almost it's a temporary alliance. In other words, in all of their minds, and at the same time, you can see that Chris Pratt's character is kind of having, Peter Quill is kind of having feelings for Gamora in terms of he wants to try and protect her, um, or at least try and help her, and it leads into a few scenes later on. Our introduction to Drax, or as he's referred to, Drax the Destroyer, is basically Gamora is taken from her cell in the middle of the night because all of the people in the prison want her dead, especially Drax. And we find out that Drax's family was murdered by Thanos, so he basically just wants revenge on, or murdered by Ronan, and he wants revenge on anybody associated with Ronan. So since Thanos and Ronan are working together, and Gamora is Thanos' daughter, he wants to kill her. So there's a very long tangent of logic there, but this leads into the scene where we're kind of introduced to Drax as a whole. He is serious comic relief, if that makes any sense, in the sense that he's a very serious character. He takes everything literally, and Rocket even states at one point his species doesn't know how to like handle sarcasm. Um, but he essentially he does that, but it leads to some oddly comedic moments that make very little sense. Well, I shouldn't say that make very little sense, but they're oddly comedic because of just how awkward he is in conversation. Since obviously most interactions between um, beings that can speak in this film is there's a lot of phrases and things that are used, and there's a funny scene later on where Rocket says he's not going to get sarcasm, it'll go over his head, and Drax responds, "Nothing goes over my head, I would catch it." And it's the again, it's the idea of the euphemism, that he can't wrap his head around it, he can't get it. But it's a reoccurring gag. They don't go away from it, which is nice because it has some continuity with the character, where they don't just use it for a couple of laughs and then kind of go away from it after that. Uh, but essentially, Peter Quill convinces Drax that he shouldn't kill Gamora and he should instead help them escape, so that he can go after and kill Ronan. So this leads to a plan where Rocket devises that they basically do a bunch of stuff, and this is also another really funny part where he basically sends everybody off to go get certain things for the plan. And so they go off and get stuff, and Peter Quill has to go essentially get this guy's fake leg. So he gets the fake leg, he brings it back to Rocket, and Rocket just kind of laughs at him and says, "Wow, you actually got it. I was joking." And it's an extremely funny scene because he says, when he says, "Oh, I need this leg," he doesn't let on that it's a joke. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't start laughing until Quill actually brings him the leg. And this is a reoccurring thing that happens in future movies as well. With other things, Rocket is like obsessed with fake body parts for some reason. It's kind of strange. He's almost like a intergalactic version of Carrot Top. But the they do wind up escaping, and this leads them to basically this place called Nowhere. And Nowhere is, this kind of sets some stuff up a little bit later on for the Marvel universe, because Nowhere is the severed head of a Celestial, and Celestials are these extremely powerful beings. It's kind of like Galactus. I can't remember if Galactus on the comic books is actually a Celestial or not, but it sets some stuff up because Nowhere, they literally, it's like the severed head of a space god that's been turned into a city, and they mined it out and stuff. But the reason why they go to Nowhere is because that's where the Collector is, and the Collector is actually the being who was in the post-credit scene of Infinity War, or not Infinity War, Thor: The Dark World, where the Warriors 3 bring the Infinity Stone, the Red Stone, the Ether, in order for safekeeping. So uh, they go there, and Peter Quill intends to sell it. Gamora wants it to go to the Nova Corps, but they essentially they don't know what it is. They don't know, and they don't know why Thanos wants it. So the whole idea is that they bring it to the Collector. He'll know what it is and how to deal with it, and then they can go from there. So they go there at the same and they split up when they go there. Drax, who is hellbent on vengeance, decides to invite Ronan to nowhere in order to fight him one on one. The Gamora, Groot, Rocket, and Star Lord go to the Collector in order to try and sell, or in order to find out what it is. They then find out that apparently uh, the little round ball houses an Infinity Stone, specifically the Life Stone, and the Life Stone basically spreads death. The irony there. And he basically he offers to buy it. They wind up taking it back with them. Star Lord wants to sell it because it's worth a crap ton of money. Gamora wants to bring it to the Nova Corps for safekeeping, and they wind up having an argument about it that then ends when Ronan shows up. Now Ronan manages to take the Infinity Stone. He almost kills Drax, and he almost kills Gamora and Peter. But Peter is able to signal Yondu, who basically wants his head on a pike after an earlier scene where the score they were supposed to get was the Infinity Stone, and Peter just sort of ran off with it. And again, this is kind of it's strange in the sense that the sequel in Volume 2, they kind of build up that Yondu and Peter kind of have this weird father-son relationship. Well, not, I shouldn't say weird, but they have this kind of like father-son relationship. In this movie, it's really not played up at all. He's kind of just Yondu's just kind of a psychotic asshole. Um, but going back from that, the whole thing is that they need to get it back, and Star Lord is willing to help Yondu get the crystal back if Yondu is willing to help him. So now that we have kind of all our players together, they manage to go to the Nova planet, which now that Ronan has the Infinity Stone, Ronan is actually powerful enough to wield it by himself without killing himself. So he's able to install it into his massive hammer and actually use it to kill people. And apparently, this makes all this kind of stuff in Thor: The Dark World a little weird when it comes to the Red Infinity Stone, the Reality Stone. Is that in this, if Ronan touches the surface of a living planet, he will kill everything, and that is why they are trying to stop him. Because if he reaches the Nova Prime planet, if he takes a step onto the planet, he has the ability to kill the entire planet. And that's their whole goal at this point, is they're trying to stop him from killing the entire planet. And there's a few scenes that are leading up to this that kind of make us again, it's all about character development, and the character development in this film is actually really good, despite the fact there are so many different ones that you've been introduced to just in this film. You understand Drax's motivation. You kind of understand Rocket and Groot's motivation. You understand Peter's motivation. You understand Gamora's motivation, and all of their motivations, even though they're not the same, they all line up in the same direction, which is what a good, smartly written film does when it has an ensemble cast like that. So going forward, um, you have again, this all leads up to the final set piece, which is the battle on the Nova planet. Now, the battle on the Nova planet is extremely well done. You have multiple facets of it. They have this entire plan, which is basically almost like a pipe dream. That most of it seems to work out relatively okay. It is complete pandemonium. The stuff that they do in this fight is really, really interesting. The stuff with the Nova Corps ships, they have this giant net that tries to uh, stop Ronan's ship in midair, and so they can infiltrate it and they can shut everything down. And again, the battle with Ronan is actually very satisfying. There's a lot of stuff going on, and the Guardians are extremely outclassed when it comes to going up against him. You know, he's essentially mopping the floor with them left and right until until Rocket flies through the front window of the ship in the Milano, the Peter Quill ship, and flattens Ronan. And this actually leads up to one of the heaviest scenes. Well, one of the most emotional scenes in the movie. And again, I have to credit to Vin Diesel that he can actually get emotion from saying the same line over and over and over again. And it's the ship is going down, and they have no way off. And if it crashes, they're all going to die. So Groot makes this basically wooden sphere that, and he entwines them all with roots. So it's almost like a seat belt, but he's protecting them. But even Rocket says that if he does this, he'll die because he's going to take the brunt of the explosion when the ship hits the ground. Even if they live, he's going to die. And Groot says, again, it's probably one of the best lines in the movie. He says, "We are Groot," and it's a very touching scene. And then of course the ship crashes and Groot gets exploded, um, which leads to some other things later on. But he gets exploded, but Ronan survives the crash, and it's kind of one of the moments in like a good film. It's like, how the hell do you kill him? Like, there's no way to kill him. It's impossible to kill him. And then they essentially they have this almost unspoken plan where Rocket basically has this super gun that they already shot Ronan with once and didn't kill him. And then Peter Quill is able to distract him with the dance off. And the dance off scene is actually hilarious. I love the dance off scene, even though I know some people find it kind of cringy. I really do enjoy it. And Rocket is able to shoot his hammer, which has the Infinity Stone in it, and blow up the hammer, which basically sheds the Infinity Stone from him. Peter Quill grabs it before it hits the ground so it doesn't murder the planet. Now, Peter Quill is able to hold onto it for whatever reason, and they don't really explain. They explain it in the next movie why he's able to do that because of his parentage, because his father's a not a celestial. I forget what his father is. It's some sort of I forget what race it is, but uh, basically they and he's able to hold on to it, and then the other Guardians all grab onto him in order to shoulder the burden, and they use the Life Stone to destroy Ronan and finally kill him. Now again, this is something that is semi retconned in Captain Marvel because that movie's a piece of crap. Because they make Ronan out to be a bitch, essentially, in that movie. You know, Captain Marvel flexes her muscles a little bit in front of him, and he says, "All right, we're gonna leave now." It's like, no. Ronan the Accuser would beat the living crap out of you with his massive hammer. He has a freaking gravity hammer. He can beat the living hell out of you with it, and it shows that in this movie where he's essentially up against five superheroes, and they literally only win because they're able to distract him for a second and blow up his weapon. That's the only reason that they win. They can't beat him head on. They can't beat him head on. It's not possible for them to do so. They had to go the side route and disarm him in order to defeat him. And even then, they had to use an Infinity Stone. So now that they have that, they put the Infinity Stone into a holder or it's a little sphere that wraps around it so that it doesn't kill anybody. And basically, the end of the movie ends kind of how you'd think it does. The Nova Corps exonerates all the Guardians of their past crimes. They're allowed to go free, and the Yondu is given the Infinity Stone. However, inside of the little sphere is actually a wishing troll instead of the Infinity Stone, which again I find it to be a particularly amusing scene. And Yondu it sets a little bit up for the follow up film. At the same time, you also see that Groot is not entirely dead. He is a small part of him has survived and is growing in a pot, um, which sets up his growth through Guardians 2 and also going into Infinity War. So now that that film is over, you know it was a really good starting off point for the cosmic realm in Marvel, and I can't say enough good things about it because it does a lot of things really, really, really well. It gives you that um, it gives you that great balance of comedy and action, and it's almost a perfect balance, which is why it's so good. I have some problems with the sequel because they off balance the action with the comedy, but in this one they do a very very good job at balancing those two things out, and it works so well with the story, the musical soundtrack, which is what they set up with the which is what they set up with the Walkman, with Peter Quill's Walkman and his relationship with his mother. The great soundtrack. You have you have, like I said, Red Bones. You have Come and Get Your Love. You have Blue Swede. You have a ton of 70s and early 80s kind of pop rocky songs that are all kind of just complete radio classics. I love the soundtrack in this movie. I think that was a great move by James Gunn to include that. The songs that he uses in the film are perfect for the scenes that he uses them in. I think they work out really really well. But it also gives the movie kind of a unique feel as opposed to other Marvel movies. Again, because a lot of other Marvel movies do not use pop culture songs. They don't really use that. They use their own soundtracks and stuff like that. There's really no other music that just exists there. Whereas Guardians is kind of built on it, and it's something different, which is what they needed with this. They couldn't just do your standard Marvel formula with a film like this. It wouldn't have worked, and I think James Gunn knew it wouldn't have worked, and I give him credit for that. Um, so, after saying all that, what is my rating? And my rating for this film is going to be 8.6 dance offs.
Put it together.
What are you doing?
Dance off, bro. Me and you.
Out of 10. Thank you again for joining in. Next time on Journey to Endgame, we will go into the second Captain America solo film, Captain America the Winter Soldier, which also came out in 2014. And we'll go into kind of the development of that character. So now that we're all through with that, again, thank you for listening. If you have any comments or anything like that, just stick them below. Hit the like button, hit the bell for notifications, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?